I asked you not for victory, for somehow that seems wrong, but only for protection and courage to be strong. Strength not to conquer, but just that I fight well and prove myself a sportsman at the final bell. I asked you, Christ of suffering, that should I suffer pain, I'll offer it for all my sins so that it won't be in vain. And if perhaps he cuts me in the bright red blood I see, I ask that I remember the blood you shed for me.
So, welcome to the Digital Jesus podcasts. I'm delighted today to be joined by Eamon McAuley. We're here primarily to talk about Eamon's book, Fighting to Find Peace. But we're recording this as part of our Divine Mercy Novena this year. So we are going to be focusing a bit more around looking at Eamon's faith journey as part of the book. So first, just to say welcome on behalf of the Divine Mercy Prayer Group. Thanks for taking the time, Eamon, and looking forward to our little chat today.
Delighted to be here.
Okay, well, let's just and we're going to do this kind of interview style. So just want to begin, in the book, Eamon, you say that, maybe I'll answer this in the actual question, but you might want to add something to it. You said part of the reasoning, you never really intended to write the book for public consumption as such. It was more, you found yourself writing stories about Ardoyne, and you couldn't stop, and that you found writing the book therapeutic. So I've put down, I hope you don't mind me beginning by saying, so you're 54 now. So basically the opening question I've got is, so why a book and why now? Why this book and why now?
Just my love for writing has just got greater and greater. And as I say, I used to write for the Horizon with Eddie McAuley. I used to submit wee stories that Eddie would publish, and just discovered a real joy in writing. And the real joy of the book was writing it. Then I had to type it all out. That was a bit of a chore. But writing it, I found very therapeutic. I found it lovely. And reading it back, it was a joy in writing it.
Good man. I like the fact that you're writing, because it's kind of a lost art now. So you enjoy writing. Listen, that's as good an excuse as any. And if it was therapeutic. So listen, what is we're going to get to the faith aspect, as we say, but we just want to lay the groundwork, as I say, to talk a wee bit about your personal background, because in large part that's what certainly the beginnings of the book in particular. You know, you say that the book's dedicated to the people of Ardoyne, and in a large part it's about growing up in the north of Belfast in the 70s and beyond. Of course, this is during a period of time which is known as the Troubles. So let's start there.
Well, I was born in January 1966, and the Troubles broke out in 1969. So I never knew anything but the Troubles. So it just became normality, because I never experienced anything else. We grew up, I mean, two of our favourite games was hopping lorries and chasing rubber bullets. You know, we got on with life, and it was tumultuous, horrific. And we had neighbours either side of us in Fairfield Street that were shot dead. Margaret McQuarrie and David McAuley, no relation. My father was shot 3 times, and he was in a big car bomb explosion. He also had his hands beat with a hammer by the IRA. I had many friends died during the conflict, including 2 best friends, Danny Barrett and John Todd. So you know, it was terrible times, terrible ordeal. But as I say, I never knew anything else. But the boxing was my salvation. You know, boxing was my life, and I wanted to be a world champion, and that took me away from the Troubles. I was never involved in anything, never involved in any paramilitaries. I just lived for the boxing. But Ardoyne's a great community. I love Ardoyne with all my heart and soul. And wonderful people had to endure this terrible, terrible ordeal. But they did. We just went about our daily lives and trying to live our lives as best we could.
So just want to talk about your wee bit of your heritage. because you're from boxing heritage, I know your granddaddy was a boxer, and your uncle, Rinty Monaghan, was... I'm speaking a bit out of my game here, but you can say better. I know he would have been well known in that business as a champion. Also, who was Rinty, and do you want to talk a wee bit about your boxing heritage?
Well, in horse racing terms, I would have been known as a thoroughbred because it's in the breeding. And my father's father, my granddad Harry McAuley, was a professional pugilist. He was from Portrush, and he was a Northern Ireland area champion way back in the 40s and early 50s, professional champion. That was in my father's side, and my father's mother's side was Rinty Monaghan, who was flyweight champion of the world. He was also British, European and Commonwealth champion, as well as being undefeated, undisputed world flyweight champion. And that's in the days when it was 8 weight divisions, when Joe Lewis and Sugar Ray Robinson were champions, when legends were world champion. That's when Rinty Monaghan was world champion. And my uncle Sean, my dad's brother from Leganeel, he's run the boxing club up in Leganeel now since 1973, when the previous coach Terry McCafferty was shot dead while out doing a day's work. Sean took over then, and he's still there to this day, near 50 years later. So it's well ingrained in the family, boxing. I had a good footballing career, a bit of a precocious talent with the football. But I went for a trial one day at Somerton to decide. 3 lads from St Gabriel's went, and we were going to pick a Northern Ireland team. And we went to the trial. There was enough players to play off against each other. So my team won 4-2, and I scored 2 of the goals and featured heavily in the game. But my mates on the way home told me I was a cert to get picked, but I never was. And my school teachers thought it was down to the fact that I was a Catholic. So I quit football that day and started boxing. And I had a wonderful career boxing, travelled the world, met a lot of great people, and it was my salvation, as I said earlier. It took me away from paramilitaries and what was going on in my area at that time. My father was dead set against me going to the boxing. He wanted to see me continuing playing the soccer. He went to 2 youth leaders, Mickey Brennan and Hugo McGee, and asked them would they persuade me to go back to the football. But it wasn't for changing. And the reason why my dad was so concerned was because his father, Harry McAuley, who I spoke of earlier, he ended up with pugilistic dementia. And he died at 58. But he was ill for 10, 15 years before that. And my dad didn't want to see it repeated. And that's very sad. So that's, but once I went to the gym in the Sacred Heart under Eamon McAuley, I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked with the boxing. I loved it, I loved the buzz, and there was no going back for me. And then my dad accepted that and supported me.
I want to speak a wee bit about your daddy, because there's no, I suppose, getting away from Eamon. I think it's like you say, probably a book in itself could be written about your daddy himself, and it's obviously a big part of this story that you've written. So Coco, as he was known in the local community, and maybe just say a few words in and around that about the book or just on your personal life.
Well, I think my father is the star of the show in the book, and I'm happy for that to be the case. He had a very violent life, unfortunately, but my dad was a good man. The Troubles broke out, and people joined organisations and got at my dad through hiding behind them organisations, and that done his head in. My dad had knife and battle wounds from before the Troubles started, but as I said earlier, he was shot 3 times. He was shot twice by the IRA in Pilot Street in 1973, shot in the foot and shot in the stomach. He was shot in the Avenue Bar in 1989 when 3 Catholics were shot dead. He was in a big car bomb explosion in Etna Drive, which killed 2 fellas, blew a guy's head off. And my father was in his car, and there's photos in the book of the car that my dad came out of, and you wouldn't believe anybody could have come out of that car alive. My dad was also involved in killing a fella in a street fight in Camden Town. My dad said the guy was a bully boy. It followed my dad into the toilets to pursue the argument they had outside, and my dad hit him. And my dad walked out of the toilets and walked out of the bar, and unfortunately the fella died. We don't know how he did. Did his head hit the ground? Did he choke on his own vomit? We don't know how he died, but my father had to flee Camden Town then and come back to Ardoyne. So my dad's street fighting prowess was legendary, and his fighting with the paratroopers. They flew a regimental boxing champion over from Germany to challenge my dad. You just couldn't make that up. And my dad done him. He judiced my dad with a knuckle duster. And there's people still alive to this day who were there, who witnessed it. And but my dad filled him in, my dad done him. And when the guy was laying in a heap, that's when they discovered the knuckle duster. So after that, the British Army respected him, revered him even, and never really bothered him again. And there used to be a graffiti in Herbert Street in Old Ardoyne, and it says, "Coco rules the Paras." They couldn't get one to beat him.
So you're from boxing heritage, Eamon. So let me start with a wee quote here, because your friend Barry McGuigan said in the foreword to your book that he had told Barry Hearn that you had the ability to be a world champion, but sadly the stars did not align for you as a pro, and that you did not get the breaks. And you yourself in the book, though, say later on that you simply thought that you were not good enough. I thought that was quite harsh on yourself. And that there was I suppose before we get into maybe some of your box career, just do you feel was there an unfulfilled potential, for want of a better expression? What are your thoughts in reflection on that?
Well, Barry was also an old sparring partner of mine, or I was an old sparring partner of Barry's, whatever way you want to look at it. And yeah, I never fulfilled my potential. But as I say in the book, probably because I wasn't good enough, but maybe that was a bit harsh, but a world champion will always find his way. You know, he'll always find his way, a world champion. He'll overcome obstacles, and that's what makes him very special. That's what makes him a world champion, and I didn't. But, you know, a lot of things happened to me. A lot of people pulled out of fights at the last minute. Fights that I had trained diligently for 3 months and maybe flew over to London. The opponent pulled out the day of the fight, the day before the fight. That must have happened to me 10, 15 times. I had a lot of bad luck. And but as I say, a world champion will always find a way. He'll have the drive and the ambition, but that's what happened with me. But the 10 years or so that I boxed, I had a wonderful time. I met kings and queens and presidents. I travelled the world, and yeah, I wouldn't be what I am today only for the boxing. I boxed in many special places: the Royal Albert Hall, Wembley a few times, King's Hall, Preston Guildhall, boxed in a lot of the Hilton Hotel, the Grosvenor House Hotel. I mean, I boxed in some very, very special places, and I was always well treated. People always looked up to boxers, and I was given a lot of respect.
Unlike yourself, I'm no historian or expert. I did a wee bit of homework with regards to your book, but not your career. So I wanted to talk a wee bit about those 10 years as you described. What would you say were some of the achievements and your proudest moments as a boxer in those 10 years? You want to maybe highlight one or two of those?
But yes, I won Ulster, County Antrim Federation and Ulster titles. I was beaten in an Irish final in 1981. I went to England, and that's when I really came to the fore. And I was knocking people out with one punch. I had great punching power. And the Manchester Evening News, the editor of the sports editor, Ed Barry, started calling me the Belfast Bomber. But at that time, bombs were going off all over England, maiming and killing many people. There was bombs went off in the Arndale Centre in 1983 in Manchester when I was there. So I felt very uncomfortable with the Belfast Bomber tag. So me and my uncle Gerard went down to the Manchester Evening News and asked the sports editor, Ed Barry, would he desist from calling me the Belfast Bomber. I told him, listen, I've come over here to get away from all that. So, unbelievable. But,
yes, he was on the retreat all the time. McAuley, sensing victory, was there. The right hand caught him a little left.
And the referee just didn't even count over him. So it was blessed with that. Rinty was a great right hand. And maybe that's where I inherited that.
He changed it nicely to the head.
Great moments in the boxing career. Went to Colombia and Panama.
Greg, a wee bit sloppy with his shot. Down again for another left.
Bit here in the second. Short right.
Commonwealth and European as well as WBC world champion. We sparred many I must have sparred about 15 world champions, legends like Jaime Garza, Gabriel Ruelas, Marcus Filizana, Antonio Esparza goes. Listen, loads of world champions, and I didn't ever feel that I was out of my league. I felt comfortable in there sparring with them, and just unfortunately didn't fulfill my potential, but had 10 wonderful years boxing, and many highlights, and the people of Ardoyne were behind me. They used to come in their droves to watch me in the Ulster Hall and the King's Hall, and the black taxi drivers wouldn't charge me. When they brought me down to Castle Street, to the gym, Barney Eastwood's gym in Castle Street, when the taxi drivers brought me down to King Street and back, they would never ever charge me. So that was their way of supporting me, one of their own. The people, Ardoyne people were 100% behind me, and it was just wonderful. Wonderful times, wonderful memories, and there you go.
I've asked the biggest achievements. Do you have a biggest upset maybe? Was there a match that always sticks in your mind? A boxing match where maybe it just one of those ones that haunts you, as they say?
Well, two.
Our biggest upset, there's two.
Yeah, two. Getting beaten in the Irish final in 1981 by Billy Nicholson. I got stopped in the third round. It was the only time I was ever stopped. First time I was ever put down. I was put down twice in the mat in my career. This was the first time I experienced that. And it was just like the Rocky films portrayed it. You know, you hear the sound of the crowd and then silence, but you can hear your own heart beating as you're falling. You can feel yourself falling. And then when you hit the canvas, boom, the noise of the crowd comes back. And I got up, I beat the count, but the referee stopped me, and I was pushing the referee. I was furious because I had beat Billy Nicholson a few weeks before that in the Ulsters. That was a big disappointment. It took me a while to get over that. And then, of course, my professional defeat, the Andy Furlong, December the 3rd, 1987. It's tattooed on my brain. I was unbeaten then. I was seen as a massive big prospect. I was topping the bill in the next Barney Eastwood's next bill. It would have been a small hall promotion, and I was going to be topping the bill. But things went wrong that night with Andy Furlong. He was a southpaw. He came in at the last minute, and that was very tough to get over. I thought it was unbeatable. I really did. I went from having very low self-esteem and no confidence to being overconfident. And that fight there, that changed the whole dynamic. It took me a long time to get over that fight. Took me years. It affected my confidence for years.
I need to mention this. You talk about it in the book, Eamon, and you've not brought it up yourself. You've been very humble here today. But it's one of the ways I came to know you, because it's the infamous story around Ardoyne, of course. Is you're shaking your head. You probably know what's coming up. It's the beating of the para, as they say. You talked about your daddy and his reputation with the paras. And this is obviously one of your crowning moments.
And I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
So do you want to, rather than me explain it, do you want to? It'd be good. Let's hear your take on the infamous
1985 ABA final. I got to the finals of the ABAs. There only ever been one guy from the north of Ireland to win the ABAs. That was Jack Gartland in 1928, and he went on to the Olympic Games. So there I was in the form of my life. I was getting great sparring with Rocky Kelly and Billy Hardy, and I was knocking everybody out, and I was in the final of the ABAs, and my father was very proud. And the irony was that I was up against a paratrooper in the final. And with the whole history of the parachute regiment and the pain and the hurt that they had caused in my community, and my dad being synonymous with fighting with them and beating them on the street, you know, it did put me under an awful lot of pressure. If I had lost, it'd still be getting a cost up to this day. Oh, you let that paratrooper beat you. But I was under so much pressure. I was only 19, my first year as a senior boxer. And Carl Crook was an established international boxer. He'd been 3 times combined services champion. He'd served in the parachute regiment, but when I fought him, he had left the parachute regiment then. 3 times combined services champion, twice ABA finalist, including the previous year where he lost the big one, the Alex Dixon Olympic year. So, I mean, yep, it was a tremendous fight, and I gave him a standing count in the second round, and then he gave me 2 standing counts, nearly had me out of there. But as he was coming in to finish it, I thought of my dad, always preaching to me, catch him coming in, catch him coming in. When you catch him coming in, it's almost like you're punching twice as hard. And I was thinking that as Carl Crook came in to finish me, and I threw a right hand, And I just beat his right hand by a fraction, landed on his nose, and he went down in a heap. And that was it. The fight was over. His nose was broken 3 places.
Oh, and he's got Crook. No, it's gone the other way. Would you believe it? Oh, Crook walked right on to an almighty punch. And he stopped. It's all over. One moment he seemed to have it in the back. Here we go again. This was absolutely out of the blue again. McAuley seemed to be on his way to defeat. And then suddenly, he produced a punch, a right hand.
That was, I had cue the celebrations. I had become only the second Belfast man to win the ABA since Jack Gartland in 1928. And that would have been the highlight of my boxing career. And 2 days after that, my dad was sitting in his house in Ardoyne, Homedean Gardens. This was May, it was a nice summer's day, so he had the front door open and the living room door open, and he's sitting watching a rerun of the ABA final when the RUC come in to issue my dad with a summons. But as I say, my dad was watching a rerun of the final, so the policeman says, "Who's that and what's that?" My dad says, "That's my son, he won the ABA, British ABA title the other night." "Which one is he?" "That one with the red piping. That one there." "Oh, right, oh. They were oohing and ahhing and got really caught up in the fight. And at the end of the fight, they were asking all sorts of questions about me, shaking my dad's hand, and away they went. About 5 minutes later, they arrived back, rather sheepishly. They had forgot to give me my dad a summons. And them days, you had to put the summons into their hand. But my dad was long gone. He had put his shoes and socks on and had it over the backyard wall. So there you go.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
As they say.
Yeah. I'd done him proud and done the area proud beating the paratrooper. And me and Carl are still friends to this day. He would ring me occasionally and, you know, he's talking about coming over here, but I would never bring him in the Ardoyne. I would meet him in the town or something. But I still have a lot of respect for him, and he's a good lad. And unfortunately, he's had a very hard life outside.
Yeah, tough as well. Well, I was going to say, because there's a lovely little photo of you in, with the fella in the book, Carol. I don't know if that's pre or post match.
That's post match.
It's post match.
The para I went to war with is the caption.
And there's a lovely photo of you together after the fight, which is nice.
And I also beat his brother, Nigel.
Is his brother a boxer?
Get that in.
I've come to understand you're quite well respected as what you would call a boxing historian. You didn't just walk the walk. You can talk the talk as well. From what I understand, you know, you love it as a passion, as a history, and you know all that stuff. So, what would be your take on boxing today? And
one of the greatest boxers ever come out of Britain and Ireland. Britain was Benny Lynch from the Gorbals in Glasgow, one of the greatest of them all. Unfortunately, drank himself to death at 33, but what a great boxer he was. Yes, the boxing today is not the same game that I fell in love with 40 years ago. It's becoming a bit of an ignominious mess, a bit of a joke. The proliferation of all these belts, WBA, WBC, WBU, IBO, IBF, silver belts, diamond belts, super champions. We're littered with belts. It's belts, belts, belts coming out of your ears. It's, you know, and these people like Eddie Hearn and Kinahan, I don't know, do they have boxing best interests at heart. Yes, when I grew up, I read magazines. When I fell in love with boxing, I really fell in love with boxing. I studied every aspect of it. I bought the Boxing News, which was a weekly publication, the Ring magazine, the Boxing Illustrated, the KO magazine. I read them all and was fascinated with all these characters that come out of the 20s, the 30s, guys like Harry Greb, Jack Dempsey. And they're indelible in my brain, tattooed in my brain, and I have a real passion for boxing, but just sad to see the way it's going today with bloggers and YouTubers and Conor McGregors and guys getting 100 million a fight when I think of black guys like Charlie Burley in the 30s, never even got a sniff at a world title shot because of the colour of his skin. It makes me so mad. But the amateur boxing is, I'm still in love with the amateur boxing at grassroots, but the boxing might be cut from these next Olympics. In fact, I've made a decision that it will be cut, but they're appealing it. So I hope it doesn't go to the Olympics because it's vitally important. And amateur boxing is the umbilical cord of boxing. If it dies early, the pros will die too. And unfortunately, not so many people are boxing in America now. All the black heavyweights, the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, you know, there's too many choices now, the kids. But as I say, if we can get back to one champion, like there was in my great uncle Rinty Monaghan's day, if we can get back to that where it's a lot simpler, you know, that would be good. Because it breaks my heart, the way boxing is today.
There you go. Thanks for sharing that, Eamon, and I'm sure the boxing aficionados out there will relate to a lot of what you're saying. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, well listen, before we wrap it up here, I want to just let people know how they can, of course, get a hold of the book, where, as we say, a lot of this, what we've talked on in and around today, is unpacked more. And a good read. I just really hope people will take the opportunity and they pick it up, because like I was saying to him, some people might think under the illusion it's just a book about boxing or sport or somebody's life, but it's a lot more than that, and especially, as I say, from the faith element, in the context of what we're sharing this, you know, it's all in there. So I'd encourage, hope people might take the opportunity to pick it up and read more of a lot more of the stories than what we've shared here today, Eamon.
There's a lot of humour in it too.
And there is. It's good comedy. You had a comedian. You'd mentioned 4 people that inspired you, if I remember rightly, at the end, and I'm sure one of them was a comedian.
Ronnie Barker.
Was it Ronnie Barker? A wee bit before my time, as they say, Eamon, but I know the name all right. But there you go. So, but there is good humour, and well, anyone that knows Eamon, he spent the day together. He's been cracking the jokes, as they say, as we go along, which has been appreciated. Keeping it light. So, well, listen, I suppose the thing to do is, Eamon, let folk know how they can get it. For locals, a lot of our viewers are local, so if you are local to Arddoy and Belfast, how can you get a hold of it, Eamon? And if you're a wee bit more international, is there a way of getting hold of the book? Yeah,
well, if it's local, 71 Highbury Gardens is where I live. That's where you'll get the book.
You can't get any more local than that. Just rap his door, as they say around here.
Just rap my door.
No delivery, no P&P.
That's true, yes, cheaper. And of course, all the good bookshops, Waterstones, WH Smith, Hastings, they all have it. And yep, that's where it'll be. And I hope you buy it. I really do.
And internationally, is there a way?
Oh, yes,
I know we get folk from America and stuff in Canada that
Amazon, it's all online.
So Amazon, I don't even know if that's a word. You know what I mean? Search it on Amazon and there's good stuff.
Google.
Fighting to Find Peace is the title, the official title of the book. Eamon McAuley, and like I say, definitely worth a read. Whether you enjoy sport, just people's life. You like history, about you're interested in the Troubles and what it was like living in and around Arddoy in the north of Belfast, 70s, 80s, and as I say, with the faith, if you want to hear about Eamon's exploits in Medjugorje, Poland, Curcio and all that good stuff, and how the faith's played a role in that. It's all in there. It's wholesome, as they say. It's a good read. So please and support Eamon. He's put a lot of time and energy into that, so we'd be supporting Eamon for all that hard work as well. So if I think there was one question that I didn't. You've mentioned some inspirational figures, Eamon, in your life. And I know I've seen some photos and I've seen the things. I know you've met some tremendously famous celebrities, both in the sporting and just in the celebrity world. I was just wondering if there was one in particular. Might be a nice wee way to wrap up that memorable celebrity, whether it be the sporting world or celebrity world, that you just one of those ones again that maybe just implant in your memory that were impressive, maybe as a person. You thought, you know.
Well, my hero growing up was Barry McGuigan, and I got very friendly with Barry. I was in the Castle Street gym with him and sparred with him quite a few times. And when Barry left Eastwoods and went to live in England, Faversham and Kent, he invited me over to his house a few times. I've been in his house. Barry's always been great with me. He's fixed me up with Barry Hearn. When my contract ended up with Barney Eastwood, he rang me up one day and he says, "Why are you not boxing? You could be world champion." And he fixed me up with Barry Hearn. Barry's always been there to help me. He's done the forward in my book. We would be in regular contact to this day. And Barry was a hero of mine, and he's remained a great friend. So Barry has been an inspiration to me. I loved him as a boxer, and he's a good person. And he gets a wee bit of flack sometimes, but I can only speak as I see. And I know other guys, other friends, Eamon McAuley, Damien Danny, quite a lot of the other guys that I can mention, that Barry's tried to help in their careers. So Barry's been an inspiration to me.
Well, there we go. Listen, on that note, then, just on behalf of the Divine Mercy Prayer Group, on behalf of our Divine Mercy Novena this year, thanks again, Eamon, for taking the time to... thank you for devoting a bit of energy, chunk of your life into the book and sharing that with us. And thank you for taking the time today and for the novena to come down and share some of that with us. So until next time, as we say here on the channel, peace, love, and God bless.
And he stopped. It's all over.